Who am I? One of the most common questions I hear in therapy sessions, particularly when people are going through rough times or struggling to deal with something very heavy or traumatic, is how do I know who I am? And why that is important is because knowing who you are is a big indicator of where you're going, but is intricately woven into how you experience, process emotions, and your level of emotional fluency or granularity for understanding what you're feeling. The concept of identity in itself is a very complex topic, but it comes up very often because nobody really sits down with us and goes through with how to figure out who we are. And that's probably because we always just kind of muddle our way through lives and figure it out as we go. There's nothing wrong with that. But one of the downsides is, and particularly what comes up in sessions when this is problematic, is that we very quickly identify where we belong, what groups we belong to, how we fit in. And that typically works as a way of kind of soothing this uncomfortability of not knowing who we are. Because at least if we fit into a group, we fit in with others, then that's good enough. I kind of know my place. And for the vast majority of people, I imagine that that's good enough. Except for when those things fall apart. Except for when life gets tough. Except for when we're dealing with emotional tragedies or emotional burdens that go beyond the confines or scope of what any group can offer us. This is problematic because often the groups we belong to operate on rather strict, rigid, confining ideologies that aid in creating a structure, that aid in helping us navigate and work through different things. But the fact of the matter is, what happens when those ideologies, that strict structure, that rigidity doesn't belong to you anymore? What happens when what you're feeling doesn't match well with what the group accepts? And so it's important to consider the fact that when trying to experience authentic emotions and getting deeper in touch with what matters to you, knowing who you are is extremely important. I always like to say to people that when you tell somebody, I love you, the most important word in that sentence is I, because it's the driving factor behind the love. The second most important word in that sentence is you. And so the better we know who we are, the better I know who I am, the better I know who you are, the more substance is given to the word love. And so if we apply this example further into our lives and we take a look at how understanding who I am can play a major role in how I experience things, then we might actually have a good handle on impacting how we act and how we respond or react to our emotional environment. So let's start with looking at how a sense of identity might impact the emotional roller coaster. So two of the main components that go into understanding emotions is what we feel in our body and what we think. And those two things typically don't go together well. Why? Because they don't share a common language. I have a teacher who tells the story that things like sadness, anger, insecurity, grief, joy, those are labels that the mind uses to guess at what we're feeling. And I've actually heard it said in different ways in sessions with clients where people will say things like, I feel like this isn't true. I don't know about you, but I know I've heard that before, but I don't know where truth is felt. And I gotta be honest with you, I've been guilty of talking like that in the past because it sounds genuine, it sounds authentic, but to be honest, truth isn't something you can feel. What you can feel is physiological senses, but even that is a bit limiting. I will give you a good example. You ever been scared? The feelings in your body sometimes go beyond actual words. Sometimes we can't express that feeling in your stomach. It's just there. You know you feel it. It's unpleasant, but words don't do it justice. And might be able to say that you have a pit in your stomach or a ball in your stomach, or you might be able to say like you have an agitation somewhere. But even that doesn't fully describe it. And so if we take a look at what happens in the body as being one of the main components to understanding our emotions and our feelings, the mind jumping in is a way of having access to not just understanding, but then expressing to others, exploring and trying to figure out, because in the end, your body says something, your mind says what, why, and then immediately to use that to inform what to do, which goes into behaviors. But those first two are extremely important. And so I would argue that it's very beneficial to see how identity could impact the relationship between these two pieces. So the first one is when your emotions start to manifest in terms of physiological sensations, your mind is going to interpret that in a multitude of ways. And how identity plays a role in that is, imagine your experiences through life go into creating a concept of who you are. That means that your beliefs about the world, your values you put in place, the things that matter to you, go into building how you understand what those feelings mean. And so the more you're focused on group identification, or at least not having a deep sense of reflection on who you are as a person, that changes how well you can understand what's being sent by the body. And so, for example, if you're stuck into a very specific group, what you're feeling might be something that is unacceptable, and it might be in response to something that goes against the group norms, or goes against group practices, or goes against what they accept. And if that's the case, what you're feeling about any event might not be authentic. It might be something that is pushed away, might be clouded in shame or disgust, or it might be deemed to be unsafe. And so your mind puts these labels on things, which very quickly supplants any emotional analysis or expression. And because we have that meaning behind it, we have that coherent story that your mind needs to hold on to, it immediately jumps into reaction. And so, like I said, you have this relationship between what's being felt and what's being thought. Well, that's going to be interpreted in one way. The other thing is, perhaps the group that you belong to, or your family culture, or just your environment might not be a place where feeling things has been explored or shared or even valued. Oftentimes, we end up being given advice to not pay attention to negative stuff, or try and push past it. And so you might feel heaviness or tightness in your muscle, or sluggishness, or a sense of resistance somewhere. And if you're not really well connected to yourself and you're more connected to the group, you might end up misinterpreting these signs and thinking, nope, I just got to push through it and not pay attention to this. Well, that's not really valuing, honoring, or exploring what you're feeling. And oftentimes that happens over and over and over, which builds into impacting your quality of life, impacting your personal expression, and ultimately eroding your personal relationships, not just with those around you, but yourself as well. And so this can have a major impact on not just your emotions or your quality of life, but also on yourself, on your sense of identity. And so the less you know about yourself, the less skills you have with exploring these emotions, the more negatively impacted your ability to develop a sense of self becomes. And so it becomes this this vicious circle. Another thing that might play into not being able to feel what's going on in your body and quickly explaining it away with your thoughts and values and meanings that you put on it can be whether or not feeling was modeled, whether or not anyone around you knew how to pay attention to what was going on or knew how to ask, knew how to say, what's going on? Talk to me about what you're feeling right now. We usually don't even use those words. We don't ask somebody what you're feeling. We say very quickly, give me an appraisal, give me a judgment. How are you feeling? And we respond in kind with good or bad. And most times we just pave over it with good, I'm fine. I know that that's the social parameters that we function in. I know that's the way that things are expected, but it's important to know that your practices end up becoming what you actually do for yourself. And so if it was never modeled, never practiced, never shown, then it makes sense that we don't know how to listen to what's going on in our body, which means we probably don't know how to attribute the right emotional, the right thoughts, the right meanings to things that are going on. And so not knowing who you are, not having a deep sense of self, negatively impacts how we interpret what we're feeling and the tools by which we use to assess that. And if those two are heavily impacted, then something else happens. The way we respond to our emotions is also impacted. And so we end up spending real little time in thinking about what we could do, and we go into just quick reactions. Not really a response. And that's a conversation for a different topic, but I do want to get into the fact of if you find yourself being stuck in scenarios, you find yourself being unhappy or stagnated or even a bit numb to what's going on inside you, then chances are that your sense of self is lacking a little bit. And that by exploring who you are and really sitting down and thinking about that and reflecting on not just where do I fit in, but within the groups I fit in with, where am I different? How do I have a unique identity inside this group? And if the group was gone, who would I be? Where would I fit in? Because that's extremely important. And it doesn't mean that because the group is no longer there that you can't still have access to some of those things. But a good idea is being able to move beyond group to individuality. For example, somebody who plays baseball or basketball might say things like, I'm a baseball player. But if we take baseball away, who would the person be? Well, we can access things like, I'm athletic. And that's part of a larger group, but it's also very individualized. And you can explore the degree to which you are athletic. You might think of yourself as a Christian or a Muslim or Jewish or Buddhist or whatever group. And that's great to have that group identity, but you might also think that you're faithful, that you are a person of belief and hope. And those, again, are larger concepts that don't apply just to a group, but then can be attributed to a particular individual. And being able to explore things like that, being able to give yourself that kind of attribute, that kind of quality and substance that is unique just to you, gives you two things. One, it extracts you from just rigidity and group dynamics, but it also gives you contact with, connection to a larger idea that's not so confined by group ideologies. And that can be useful in terms of understanding how what you're feeling is interpreted in your meanings and your analyses, your interpretations, consequences, repercussions, judgments, all of that can be adjusted and shaped. And this can have a very profound effect because as you develop and explore more about who you are, you're going to find that this has a retroactive effect in the sense that the things you've gone through already are going to evolve. They're going to change. They're going to have a different texture to them. They're going to have more meaning, more things that you can latch onto, more things that you can connect to, more things you can learn from. And by being able to develop that type of connection to who you are and how that impacted your feelings in the past, your feelings in the present, gives you an access to knowledge and wisdom that is so useful, so rich that it will benefit you and those around you for years to come. And so it is about developing another tool in your emotional toolkit. And that emotional tool is, who am I? So if you're interested in exploring how identity impacts your emotions in a more deep way and delve into this conversation, like and subscribe. There'll be more videos, more content to be able to explore this, and we'll see this down the road. If you want to participate in the community and communicate your experiences and share, please join the school community, Unshakable, Mastering the Art of Emotional Fluency, and share your experiences. And we can all learn from one another and grow together, because through connection, through reflection, and through others, we definitely build something more substantive, something more useful, and something that can really help benefit us all. It's not about adding and changing new emotions. It's about just refining what you already know and digging deeper. If you just want to observe, you just want to watch, then I encourage you, at the very least, grab a notebook, grab a journal, and start exploring on your own. Ask yourself some questions. Reflect a bit on, who am I? Where does this come from? And do these feelings really belong to me? Because if they don't, and it's not truly what you're feeling, chances are you are experiencing and living the feelings of others. Oftentimes we hear things like should, supposed to, have to. They might be your words, but they also might be the words of a group. They also might be the standards of a group that don't really belong to you. And so take the time, explore it. And I would love to hear what your thoughts are. Please share what this is like for you. Again, like and subscribe, join the school community, participate in the conversation, or at the very least, just look within and see what you find. Thanks for listening.